Today, morning period went a blast for me, and more so neutrally, I did my stuff again. I showered on time, slept an extra 20 minutes, and it's good. But I realized when I went down to speak to my mom at 7:20 a.m., I realized she has a meeting too, and I should have woken up earlier. And she's gonna be showering also pretty soon. So I debated on whether for her to shower downstairs or upstairs. So I still had to shower too. So she just showered downstairs instead. I showered upstairs, prepared my belongings, and prepared to go to school pretty fast. And approximately 7:30 a.m., I left. And this time, my mom decided to do another one of those. So again, this time, and this time I made sure to bring down my three whole flour English muffins and replace three of these sandwiches at McDonald's and removed all that cheese. So all I get is the protein and the carbohydrates, so I get all that long day energy. So I also don't gotta prepare lunch either at that same time, and I also don't snack. But my mom took the old route to school again, and I approximately made it at around 7:50 a.m. This time I had a quick talk with Hannah and Sadie's group again, but I forgot to mention them last Friday. But I think I'll do this again. Credit to them for being funny and humorous. But later, I knew this time in this morning, with this period, and I checked on the library, and there aren't much people there. So for about 10 more minutes, I hesitated, but I visited another attachee of an old friend group of who I can remember, of whom the anchor for is Isaac, and credit to his group. Anyway, I did my intros, I asked them about their stuff, and it went mostly awkward, but I understand why. And they're all freshmen too, except a few, I believe. I also noticed beside me my table partner from period 4 arguing with a zesty guy in a very humorous manner, saying, "You know what this is? Go to class, daughter." He was arguing with one of them, saying that he's a freshman and that he is really sorry. Funny stuff, I don't remember though. Nonetheless, I was not able to advance the local conversation today as fast, but I did get it to first base, if you could speak in that metaphor. But I was able to hit the basics and get to know a little bit of them, although I did kind of alter the social dynamic a little bit. But nonetheless, no intersecting teachers either, so I cannot make any funny remark, so to speak. Heading down to Spanish 3, weather is as hot again, but today is our boleto and mini quiz. And our goal here is to answer true or false questions, and I was able to do it since it was fact based, not opinion. The teacher, she collected Cecilia's story again from paper, and she gave it a step. And the class this time was surprisingly ice cold quiet, though I saw some on a few games here and there. Later was a present tense review in three papers, just practicing present tense irregulars, pasted onto our notebooks. The teacher said she hasn't practiced Spanish 1 in a while, but she says no special asterisks for special verbs because we must memorize. My partners were not physically there, but my notebook was as messy because it is not a type of notebook like a folder where I can just put things in. So I had to glue mine, but I didn't have my scissors today, so it did really mess up my book a little bit. But again, it went mostly lecture based, and I know the teacher sort of hated teaching the basics as I sensed, but she said we'd go through it in warp speed, but she remained divinely patient. But the teacher chose random people from Solate, two others I still don't remember. I recognized most of these verbs, my study of the Italian and Latin etymology, so it was easy in present tense, such as venire, venire, and she picked up random students to also say these verbs out loud and all their conjugations. Some were loud, but most were quiet, so to speak, and lucky there's no homework except one online assignment. And one thing to do note is that I did not do the Conjugamos assignment yesterday because I was not logged in, so I did like 150 words, but I wasn't logged in, so I had to redo it today for credit. I also submitted the wrong picture. Anyway, so we have Cecilia and the love story, and then we might also have a test about it later on. Heading down to English 3, the weather was a little bit more cooler this time, but moving there, it was cold in the classroom, but nonetheless, most people remained talkative. Today, though, was another school ENN presentation this time before class started, and two people, Alex, Izzy, and they said sports, tryouts, college workshops, varsity tennis, football game, and some other auditions for sports, along with Club Rush back again on September 2nd next week. Credit if you guys remember my late Club Rush back last year, so I might have to plan this one a little bit more specifically with the clubs I do want to go to, but I do nonetheless say good job to these given ENN announcers, and the lack of B-roll did get me since the lighting also wasn't as good either, but nonetheless, the teacher mentioned we should also start taking our future seriously and said our next moves. She also talked about the Panther Promise Grant and said that we need to find what path best fits us, but nonetheless, we continued after on writing, and we were to do this on a Google Documents and utilize the race strategy to voice what is thought of what we thought of the posters, so of the posters yesterday, and the class remained talkative, but someone did ask if Grammarly is allowed, but the teacher said no because it's technically AI, and someone screamed cheater. But though others spoke of their own things, such as weekends or school classes, one about an AP class, but I spent 20 minutes hesitating because there were two personal response ones that I had to use the race strategy on, but I was able to do it. But for the assignments, we also had to copy what we did for the crew acronym and paste that directly onto the Google document. Some asked about the late stuff, and she said that for all work is open 2 days, although points will be lost. And nonetheless, I was able to finish this class quietly, and people were still a little bit loud here and there, but the phone caddy almost fell again. And people, I believe that the office is receiving like a few complaints about phone caddies falling because the geometry of some classes don't work. So, but heading down to period 3, I went to the restroom and I noticed vapors as always. And I had a quick talk with my former teacher from freshman year math, Frank, and she made mostly kind, but I knew that when it's in her curriculum, it's sort of difficult. But anyways, I was able to pass, say, waved her after and move on directly down to period 3. this time. And for our teacher this time, we were handed 10 minutes again. We had to answer three questions arbitrarily in the notes section of our book, answering the questions for invertible functions. I know I definitely did not talk to my team while I was doing this, but a lot of people were shaking, and a lot of them seemed to be eager to be moving because we had a quiz right after this. So I felt tired, but most of the lesson that he was trying to teach is that I realized that the inverse and the domain and range change in invertible functions. So I was able to push through this as memorizing and later applying that same rule into the quiz along with other linear equations such as x and y coordinates switch in another equation. So others were nervous, but I think I've mostly understood this, so to speak, so it was a little bit easier to understand. But the teacher was more like an iceberg today in our quiz time, though. I did tell him that I turned in late work and for him to recheck that stuff later on. Heading down to period 4, weather is as always hot. I might actually start to wear sunscreen before I actually move to each period because it is that hot. But today, I noticed a teacher hurrying as I entered. It was sort of crazy because apparently when I entered the class, someone took my seat and some boys joked and said to each other, are they going to date this given girl, for example? I believe the girl was named Maya. There was also like another one, Ella, too, they were talking about. Maya, Maya, Mia, I don't know. But nonetheless, they're also talking about all this crazy stuff that was going on. But then they did, though. They were also eating grapes, so I asked for a bunch of grapes, too, because I was a little bit hungry. So, I got that extra sugar, which probably blasted my long-term no eats for the day. But nonetheless, I asked if I could sit since one of the other students were not there, space, I guess. But this eventually got drowned out because, well, there's other people who are also acting crazy in the class, too, for other talks about classes, how difficult this AP class is, for example. But I was able to move through, and the teacher's lesson eventually took over. So on our lesson today for monoculture and the importance of agroecology, in class, the teacher with her lecture showed that she's going to be using grant money to help build our miniature school social farm. Then, with another quote related to farm to provide for others and not as profit, the teacher said that she was also explaining about an old legend about Amy's farm that used to exist but eventually got overrated because someone sold the land for some sort of fulfillment center before it was sold. She said that that was a place where a lot of people visited and asked if anyone was there before it closed off for natural food buy. She continued emphasizing, saying that this requires change and to farm properly it also means being mindful. And she even used an example is that we'd rather see a farmer student in our class. We'd rather buy that fresh from them than simply go to a store and do it ourselves, and even though the food is miles away. In class, I did almost laugh a few times here and there because even as the teacher was teaching, the boys kept joking about things here and there that were pretty funny, from complimenting this random girl to the next table, saying that like her shirt was pretty good, and making some other remarks about this yellow-haired girl. I have no idea what's going on here, but it was pretty funny though. So the teacher did end up silencing one of the boys, saying that you're no better than your brother, but and they have to babysit you, quote unquote. But the teacher emphasized nonetheless and drowned out the funny things again, and said that how farming is absolutely important. Like we have to learn like how this is doing because a given farm, even if it produces like 500 soybeans a day, if it takes like 500 miles to travel, that impact will be pretty much a lot in the environment. But I did miss several critical slides, especially because I got really in the flow with the local section. So I'll have to do that one later, which I forgot to do during lunch. But it was an essential question for video that we have to answer, and I got scared again because the ones in my table brought back the lizard to pets because the teacher always does allow them. Anyways, the movie that she wanted to show was a movie called Big Little Farm, and we were to take notes, though someone did make a joke again. She said that since the teacher said that it's a movie that's personal on some of your guys' hearts, someone said nothing scares more than gang or cartel videos, quote unquote. And even then, as one of the guys uttered that out, the teacher's TA even laughed. But a few of them eventually drowned it out, so to speak. But I tried resisting laughing because even then the lizard on my table tried coming to me. And people next to me tried to also use my notebook to stop the lizard, but I tried to resist. But I couldn't even focus on the movie because I was afraid that lizard might end up coming to me. But I don't know how to hold lizards. They said don't grab it if it comes to me, but they were probably as scared as a baseball, to be honest. But I mean, I was able to answer some of the questions, but I did miss a few critical ones. But anyway, so one of the students, I believe, left his book, so I peeked in it and saw notes from a named Efren and lots of scribbled writing, but also notes from a class from Galindo. Though other details I cannot show for their own privacy, so to speak, in this class. But nonetheless, our daily credits in this class go to quite a few people. This was Ted, the teacher herself, for being very humorous. The next one goes to Mateo. Next one goes to, I still don't remember. I might have to mention this later on. But heading down to lunch, still as hot as always, really feels like summer again. I walked across a few buildings, of course, and it was hot as hot with the weather. But upon exit of the boys' restroom, which there were vapors again, I headed down to the library. Had a short talk with Devin, of whom had an assignment about driving skills from his study skills class, and I asked about it, but it was still mostly basic stuff and how driver's permits affects legality of some things. And then this to James groups upstairs, but mostly everyone was silent and busy. But this time, I decided to open down and go down to another social interaction outing this time, and I decided to talk to a much, much, much older girl, of whom seemed a little more open, but nonetheless, I wanted to talk to him anyway. So I decided to open up the conversation, sit down, and politely ask. I said, like, how is she? How's her name? And three simple fastballs in this metaphor, so to speak. But I was not able to advance it further because on my third fastball that I said to her in the basic pitch is that I asked her, like, what's her name? They sounded more sad and closed off than they are ready. So eventually, I believe out of comfort zones, they left. So her name's Giselle, so credit to her, but there's like 100 other Giselles that exist anyway. But nonetheless, quickly before I entered the library, there was also a cafeteria too. I also saw Isaac again from the morning, but nonetheless, no reason to be present here other than look around because I was already full anyway. But also, a bold thing to note here again is that during the library outing again, when I was upstairs, that same boy group was also making a mess again, so to speak. There was something that was going on with them. So all the teachers from the librarians in the class to some of the substitutes that are in for another local teacher that's there, they all teamed up, and that one big buff guy came up and said, "No, boys, it's time to go. Please head on out of here." So eventually, some of them left because they're freshmen making a ruckus, and they also used the typical trope that these are just freshmen, they're just acting crazy, they're probably gonna get used to it later on. But no, it is what it is. But nonetheless, heading down to period 5, we had our bell work again, and basically just 5 notes about U.S. history and what we think of it. And then next was an activity about a double-sided colony map of coloring. And thankfully, unlike having to search this online, she has a colored legend key in a Google site where they're sequentially labeled, so you know what to do. And we were handed 20 minutes to do this with some music, lofi music, but I mistakenly went up when I was done, thinking I was so. But I did finish the coloring part, but I did fail to actually answer the MIDI question and also color the rest of it. So I was not able to do it, and she told me to redo it again. Eventually, I did get a stamp, but it was a little bit of a confusion point right there for me. Later, even then, one of the guys near me, Jeremiah, I believe too, and there was another one, Thomas. They want me to plug something in, I believe, but because the plug itself is sort of bent, it was a little bit risky trying to get it out. I was afraid I might get electrocuted, so I asked the teacher, even though it was a little bit awkward for her to try to plug it back in, and she said to give her a second. So nonetheless, so I did get my stamp, but my coloring is sloppy. We had notes about the American Revolution, but I felt many were anxious at the time as some were playing. Others were also shaking as they were doing this assignment, but there was not much enough time to do the notes, so I just turned in my other notes, took a picture, and eventually uploaded them online. But for the other one, I got my stamp, took a picture of that, and got that done too. But most of the time, people were just anxious and talking about their own thing. I do remember a few other boys and girls of whom I know, but we already moved seats here at this point, so I'm not sure what's been going on. But heading down to period 6, still hot weather. Anyways, I did also come late technically, but this was pretty far away from my period 5 class. The teacher announced a new art assignment where we have to grid draw and then free draw a complex Japanese woman in a dress. But I knew I had to finish out my art theme first, but today it was cool, so there was also a new phone caddy that was also installed at that same time, so others put these back. Anyway, so I did finish up my art theme, focusing on Halloween, pumpkins, bows, and decor in the basic drawing stuff using the help of a parabola, X squared, and for the class environment, it was as talkative is, and but mostly people were paying attention. But I did notice Yamaleth messing with one of the chairs near the board where the teacher was explaining something because we have to draw exactly 1.5 by 1.5 on the given paper, or else we're not going to be able to gain points for that matter. But nonetheless, I don't really have much to note here. Credit to everybody. Again, there was also another person who I remember, but I don't remember though. Nonetheless, guys, this is the end for period 6, and heading down to some extra details at this point. Um, when I was headed down to the house, still hot weather as always, but a mini note right here is that whenever using conjugamos or anything that's a foreign language, usually conjugamos has a lot of specifics when it comes to things. So even if I say levantarse is to wake up, if it's looking for something specific such as to lift, even though they're still technically the same meaning, conjugamos might still get it wrong. So this is something that I'm always like not angered on, but I'm always like disappointed because many Spanish verbs and Italian verbs can also have multiple meanings. So I know for an assignment like we need to standardize things, but I know it just gets exhausting because let's say for example I know what a word means, such as like a levantar for example. If I know how to do it and I know what it means like in the literal sense, like if it still marks to wake up or to lift oneself up, then it just gets to a point because it just makes my mind fume because conjugamos, this is the correct meaning. This is the socially used term for it. Why are we using like an older or more secondary term for this? But I know this is something that everybody gets disappointed with sometimes because conjugamos, when not many answers are put for correctly, it just gets tiring, for example, especially when I can't access a list for the exact definition. I think I even had one disappointment on the verb realizar. Obviously, it's a false cognate with realize, but realizar practically means to achieve something. It's like to get something done. And the thing is that there are multiple correct English words for this. There are multiple correct meanings for this. But when I was putting one that was correct, it was marking it wrong, even though that is the most socially accepted term for it. Only to realize that like this is what it means instead, for example. Especially with the verb cumplir. It means to carry out and do something, but cumplir can also mean other things. And it still marked it wrong. And I get specifics on antics, but it just gets like red brain disappointing because like this is correct. Why is this wrong? I'm gonna spend like 30 minutes trying to practice on this again just to get the correct dictionary saved term for this. So yeah, mini thing right there.